Hey folks, just a quick screencast on Chapter 8 and debugging. I'm just gonna cover, it should be relatively quick, cover just a few high points of debugging, and then I'll also show you how to set a breakpoint in Xcode, and then not gonna really say much about deploying and running a program. That's sort of, in my opinion, that's outside of the scope of the class, because it depends if you go on to do great things in C++ or become a C++ programmer. You know, every sort of organization has their own way of their own deploy process. So that's sort of outside the scope of the class. But first, as far as debugging goes, I'll share my screen here. As far as common errors goes, syntax errors, you should be familiar with those at this point. For instance, if I remove a colon from the end of here and I try and, in fact, I didn't even run it, I just saved it. You can see I get a expected semicolon at the end of declaration. You probably notice some error messages are better than others, and that's true of all programming languages, not just the C++ thing. Sometimes the errors tell you exactly what the problem is. This is an example of that. It's sort of makes sense, as opposed to, let's maybe fat finger a variable name. If I do that, use undeclared yearly interest rate, that one's maybe not as obvious as a missing semicolon is. So obviously you're looking for, the red squiggly lines inside the IDE for any errors. That's always helpful. Just again, a general software development, from a general software development perspective, not all IDEs are built the same. Java uses NetBeans and Eclipse, a different IDE. It sort of has its own look and feel and own set of error messages. If you're not using a compiled language like Ruby or Python, you may not get any syntax checking at all inside the IDE you're using. So it'd be sort of entirely up to you to spot any syntax errors, or if you go to run them, you'll get those errors. And of course, the toughest errors to find are logic errors, and you'll see that in your I think the assignment I'm asking you to find errors inside the area calculator app, right? There's a couple of syntax errors in there. Those will probably jump out at you pretty quickly when you paste the code in the IDE, but there's also some logic errors. So when you go to run the calculations, you'll notice based on the output, you should be running the output that I give you, the examples I give you inside Moodle. You should be entering those numbers and checking that the numbers that are calculated are correct, and some of those aren't. That's because there's logic errors there you'll have to look out for. So keep all those things in mind. So setting a breakpoint, we're just going to set a breakpoint inside the calculate future value method, just so you can see that. And so this will be different for you inside of this will be different for you if inside Visual Studio Code. Generally works the same way though. So just sort of be aware of that. So you'll run the program, and what should happen here is I'm going to enter, let's say we're going to invest $500 a month. We'll get 8% interest back, and we'll do it for 3 years. Notice that the program immediately halts, and I see my variable values over here. Now in Xcode, notice I've got a debug option up here, and then here I've got my continue, step over. Continue just runs through the program. Step over will step over a method. Step into will step into a method. Generally, I'll do F6. I'll do step over. That means you're going to sort of go line by line, and I'm just going to use the hotkeys just because it's a little quicker to do. And so you'll notice if I do F6, notice how, number one, I'm moving through that method. Then also notice how the values are changing. Notice monthly interest rate stays the same, but notice the year changes. I have to actually go 12, I think, to get, well, no, the year is going to stay the same. The months actually changes as I go forward. well, yeah, the month stay the same. The future value should be what's changing. So let's run this again. Let me go debugging, continue just to drop out of there. Let's try yes here. Let's see. Let's try 1,000 a month at 8% interest for 3 years. And if I do, so notice future value is going to change every time I have to go through the loop at least one time. So notice I'm looking at future value here. It's 4,067, and then as I loop through, as I go through another for loop, now we're up to 5,100. Into another for loop now, it goes up to 6,100, 71, 82, 43. So notice it sort of moves through that way. Okay. So using breakpoints are just a really valuable way. Lots of times you'll print out values, and that can just, it's always not clear. It can always be unclear what value is getting set at any one time. So using debugging like this and setting a breakpoint is a very sort of structured way to do that. Okay, that's all for this week. If you have any questions, let me know, and good luck.